Velkommen alle sammen. The past few months I've been covering the topic of shamanism and how it fits into the Norse religion. So there are no direct examples of what we would call traditional Siberian shamanism in the Norse sources, but if we look a bit deeper, we can definitely see traces of it and even parallels. As usual, there's always plenty of wannabe gurus online that want to make up their own ideas and think that the Norse belief system is completely different to every other culture in the world. And they say that there was no shamanism or anything like it in the Norse culture during the Viking Age. As usual, those people have not done any reading or complex, intelligent thought in the matter, because in the academic community, this is actually a huge area of study. There's been a lot of books written about it, and I'll link all those down below that you guys can go check out for yourself. So, although what we would consider traditional textbook Siberian type shamanism, that's not found in the Norse sources in great detail, at least. We do have many links and parallels to shamanism in those sources in the more broad sense of the term. So check out those videos I done on that, but today we're going to be covering the connections to shamanism just in the Norse mythology, the aspects of the gods and deities and the myths that have a clear or at least a semi-clear connection to traditional Eastern shamanism. And there are a couple great articles on this and books that I'll link all of them down below. So, first thing, Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse, the horse that Odin rides or he loans out to another god so that they can ride down to Hel and do whatever it is they need to do. So the eight-legged horse, this is not just something found in the Norse world, it's found in Siberian shamanism and basically all of the Arctic cultures around the world and their whatever type of shamanic practice that they have. Found in the Finno-Ugric cultures, even in some North American Inuit cultures. We find it in Mongolian and Indian cultures even. We even find this in cultures where they don't have horses native to the land. In some South American cultures, we find myths about an eight-legged alligator or other animals like that. It's the same thing wherever we go. This eight-legged animal, it is the vessel in which the shaman or practitioner is carried into other realms. In the Norse beliefs, Sleipnir comes up specifically anytime that there is an underworld journey. So Odin, who rides Sleipnir to Hel in the poem Baldur's Draumar. In the prose Edda, you have Hermodr, who rides Sleipnir to Hel to try to bring Baldur back to life. So these myths reflect underworld journeys that could have been done by real humans, exactly like shamanic type rituals and underworld journeys. Sleipnir's name, by the way, means the slippery one or the sliding one, translated from Old Norse. So Sleipnir is the force which helps your soul or your hugr slip in and out of your body in these shamanic type rituals. So pretty simple there. It's not much debate that Sleipnir reflects some type of shamanic practice and belief in the Norse world. Then we have Igdrasil. This one's a bit more difficult because Igdrasil is very multifunctional. It's mentioned quite a few times in the myths and it can represent some different things. I did a full video on all the possibilities here, but one of its main functions, also, again, it's a vessel in which humans can travel along to send their souls into other realms in some sort of shamanic ritual. By the way, here's my Yggdrasil scarf that many of you have picked up already. It's my favorite. After I did that video and research on Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil is my favorite symbol in all of Norse mythology now, even more than Mjolnir, just because how multifunctional and powerful it is. But yeah, many scholars, one interpretation they have related Yggdrasil to what is called the Axis Mundi, which is a spiritual concept, again, present in many cultures around the world. It's a plane in which humans can send their soul on to travel up and down during shamanic rituals, and in many of those cultures it is viewed as a tree, just like the Norse, Yggdrasil. We also have the myth about Odin, hanging on a tree for 9 nights, and then he discovered the secrets of the runes, which is a very real ritual that humans have done previously in history and are still doing today, hanging safely from a tree for a certain time period to get this out of body experience. I covered this in full detail in my Igdrasil video, and even a more private video on Patreon if you are interested in more on that. And also don't forget what Igdrasil means. Drasil meaning horse, and Igr meaning it's one of Odin's names. So Odin's horse, Igdrasil means. That's one translation of it. So again, that could be related to Sleipnir as well. While we're on it, let's speak about Odin in general, because this is very important. Many myths involving Odin are believed to reflect some sort of shamanic ritual that humans could really do. Anytime involving Odin on Sleipnir or Odin and Yggdrasil, for example, like I mentioned, it could be interpreted as a shamanic type ritual, sending the soul into other realms. Also, how Odin is said to practice the feminine magic art of Seiðr, which is often looked at as not a complete equivalent of Eastern traditional shamanism, but Seiðr is definitely a very close parallel, as I covered in my video here. But also, many of Odin's journeys into other realms is sometimes interpreted to be reflecting an act of shamanism that real humans could do, such as Odin's journey into the realm of Suttungr to get a drink from the mead of poetry. A big one is Odin's journey into Jotunheim to Mimir's well underneath the roots of Yggdrasil. He travels along, goes to underneath one of the roots of Yggdrasil to get a drink from the well for sacred knowledge. Mimir's well. Mimir was a giant talking head in one myth, but in another source, Heimskringla, Mimir is a euhemerized as a real human that got his head cut off, and Odin preserved that head in herbs, and then Odin kept this head around him to consult with the dead spirit of Mimir. And by the way, the names of the well, Mimisbrunir, and the names Mimameiðir and Hoth Mimisholt, scholars generally believe those to be alternative names for Yggdrasil as well. So again, guys, there's so much there. This is key in shamanism, and we find parallels to shamanic cultures all around the world with similar myths like this. Some scholars have also linked the poem Grimnismal to some sort of shamanic type practice where the imprisoned Odin is sitting in between two fires, and he gets glimpses into all different types of realms, including Valhalla. Again, that's not traditional shamanism, but some of the traits are there. I'm not going to go into all the details here about what shamanism is and how do we define it, because I've done other videos on that. Shamanic practices from around the world do have a lot of differences, even though we consider the Siberian shamanism to be the most kind of textbook traditional shamanism. But it's present. Those types of practices are present all around the world. A lot of differences between them, but essentially what it is, what all of them are, is a type of ritual with a purpose of getting up into a frenzied state, an ecstatic state, meant to take the practitioner on a journey into other realms. And that is the broad function of shamanism, and what they all have in common in every culture around the world that practices these things. And this is a lot of what Odin functions as in the myths. And don't forget what Odin's name means. At the end of the day, Odin's name literally means the frenzied one, or the ecstatic one, or Lord of Ecstasy, or the older form of his name, Lord of the Frenzied, Lord of the Ecstatic. So it's not just shamanic rituals that the myths about Odin represent. It's other types of ecstatic and frenzied states too. This is why Odin is also the war god that people invoke before battle. He's the Lord of the Berserkers, or the Ulfhednar, and their frenzied spirits. So that this Odin is not, all the myths about Odin are not related to shamanism, but definitely a few of them are. But again, Odin is the most complex and multifunctional deity in all of our myths, and there's a lot of different things that he represents, but the connection to the frenzied shamanic state, that's just one aspect. We can also speak about Freya. Freya is said to be the originator of Seidr, and she taught it to Odin. Again, we're not saying Seidr is a full-on equivalent to traditional Siberian shamanism, but Seidr is a very close parallel in the more broad sense of it, as I covered in this video here. So Freya does Seidr and teaches it to Odin. Some scholars have also linked the myth about Freya retrieving Odin, her husband, potentially Odin being another name for Odin. And Odin, in Old Norse, again, it means frenzy or ecstasy, same as I spoke about before. And Odin was out about traveling many strange realms, and Freya would travel among these strange realms and among strange peoples while looking for Odin in order to bring him back, because he was wandering so much. So this myth too is interpreted by some scholars as the female shamanic practitioner going out to retrieve lost souls, as they very often do in Eastern shamanism. This is a lot of the time done to heal. Like if someone was very sick and going to die, their soul was believed to be out wandering. So one of the functions would be the shaman would go out and wander and bring that soul back into that person in a healing type ceremony. But interestingly enough, healing through shamanism and Seidr, in the Norse sources, there's just one example of that. So healing is not really something that is done in any Norse parallel of shamanism. But yeah, that's the same kind of thing. Freya going out to retrieve Odin, lost souls. Same thing as Hermodr did in the myth where he goes to Hell to retrieve Baldur, or potentially that myth could be referring to Freya out looking for Odin, like Freya, this shamanic practitioner, is looking to bring Odin, this frenzy, this ecstatic shamanic state, back to her in order to do the work, what is needed. Not sure, but there could be some sort of loose connection there. We can also speak about Heimdall. There is a few connections there that could be relating him to some shamanic practices. In some accounts of Seidr, the Volva who is doing the Seidr calls forth to her the Vörður. So this is the Vardlukkir. They're basically songs to summon the spirits to the area. Now Vörður is a very specific type of guardian spirit, believed to have some connection actually to Heimdall, because Heimdall is referred to in one source as the Vörður of the gods. And we also have Heimdall mentioned on an archaeological find called the Salteby Spindle, which Odin is also mentioned on as well. Both of their names are carved in runes here. So spindle whorls are sometimes interpreted as a shamanic or Seidr tool. Of course, we find it in the Norse written sources and even in the archaeology and burials from the Viking Age. These women believed to be Seidr practitioners or Volva or shamanic practitioners, whatever you want to call it. Staffs and wands were buried with this woman. And in the East too, of course, a staff is a key tool to shamanism, but staffs in the Norse world are very often shaped as spindle whorls, just like you see here. And in the literature, Seidr is often depicted as some sort of a spinning act, like they're spinning something, they're spinning the spirits to attract them towards you, to summon them, just like a spindle whorl does to summon the wool or whatever else. So Heimdall carved on this spindle whorl like tool that could be one more connection linking him to this spiritual act as well. Finally, there is a very interesting connection to blacksmiths actually and shamanism in Eastern cultures. For example, a Yakut proverb says blacksmith and shaman are birds of a feather, and the Buryats shamanic practices there, blacksmiths and shamans always go hand in hand. And there are a few other cultures like this, at least in the cultures that had discovered blacksmithing technology. We can see a relation to shamanism between the blacksmith and the practitioner of shamanism there. We don't really have any direct parallels in any of the Norse sources to this, but of course we can maybe speak about the dwarves, who are often blacksmiths, and sometimes they come up in these myths that involve otherworld journeys as well. They come up in a lot of those types of myths. We also have the smith Völundur, who is mentioned in the lore. Actually, by the way, he is mentioned in almost every Germanic culture's lore, but Völundur in the Norse sources married the shape-shifting swan maiden Hervor, and Völundur was also able to fly, potentially referring to like shape-shifting or sending his soul out of his body. But that's about all that we have that might connect Völundur or any blacksmith from the Norse sources to anything resembling shamanism. So there's not much there. That's about it. That's about all I could find from the books and scholarly articles in the about the mythology that have been brought to attention. But there are probably a hell of a lot more. I've done a lot of research in the spiritual beliefs of these cultures outside of Scandinavia and shamanic traditions around the world, but I'm still a beginner on those. People who might be more knowledgeable in, say, Siberian or Mongolian shamanic type practices, or even the Native American myths, for example, they might be able to tell you about some more similarities and parallels in our Norse myths. Yeah, this is all kind of theoretical. Like I said, we don't have any direct sources in the Viking Age that a shamanic ritual exactly the same as what was done in Siberia in the 1700s. We don't have any of that, but like I said, we do have a lot of other things. What I covered in this video was just in the mythology, but there's lots more in the other sources, and I'm going to do some more videos on that, but that's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.